otherwise leave it off. If the latency on your audio card is higher than 6 milliseconds, you may need to turn direct monitoring on. This allows the audio to come into the sound card and right back out so that there is no delay. Otherwise it goes into your sound card, gets processed through Cubase, and then gets sent out. There are some extra options in the Expert Settings window that you can read up on by pressing Help here. Everything is well explained. Almost 99% of the time, you won't need to change any of these options. Once you select your audio driver, it appears below. Once clicked, you can then access things like Clock Source and the software control panel that I mentioned earlier. This panel is exclusive to my audio card. You'll have a different one for your audio card. For the VST inputs and outputs, you can make them visible or not. This is like hiding or showing the MIDI inputs. I have 18 ins and outs on my audio card. Chances are I'm only going to use the first 8. I might want to make the others invisible by turning their visible status to no. You don't have to do this, but it certainly cleans up the clutter and helps you select your ins and outs a lot more quicker. That's it for the basic setup of audio and MIDI ins and outs. You may have noticed the triangle and square symbols around the edge of the audio event. As you know, the left and right bottom squares are used for trimming the audio file. The square in the middle is used for changing the volume of the audio event. If you cut the event in two, you can make this side this volume, and this side another volume. If you have the info line open, you can also adjust and see its value here. By the way, you can also increase the audio file's volume, not just reduce it. If you hold down the Alt key, a slider will pop up. The two triangles on the side are for fading in and fading out the audio file. Fades and crossfades are discussed in level 2 of this video series. Sometimes you may want to cut up an audio file into small pieces for various reasons, such as vocal phrases, and then you need to move the audio events at a later time. You may inadvertently miss an audio event while you move it. To prevent this, you can take all these events and turn them into an audio part. Think of audio events as raw pieces of audio that are on the project page. We can now take all these audio events and place them in a type of container so that they are all grouped together. This is where we pick Events to Part from the audio menu. As in, take these events and turn them into a part. You can see all the audio events are now in a part. You can immediately tell this is a part because it doesn't have the side triangle fade adjustments and the volume slider. If you were to double click on a regular audio event, it would take you into the sample editor, which is the lowest level of editing. If we double click on our newly created part file, it brings us into the part editor. Makes sense, huh? Think of this just as a secondary level, just like the project page. We can adjust the audio events as usual, even double click on a specific event and go into the sample editor. You will learn more about these two editors in detail in level 2 of this video series. Learning how to use the snap mode in Cubase will make all your editing much easier. Snap means to lock to some sort of position or time. In most cases, you'll be using bars and beats as your snapping position. This is where you can turn on and off the snap button. The key command for it is J. If you want to lock to bars and beats, right-click on the ruler area and select it there. You can also choose other formats such as seconds, time codes, samples, etc. But right now we're just going to snap within bars and beats. The button to the right of the snap mode is your snap mode selector. This is where you can select whether you are snapping to a grid, in our case the grid is bars and beats, grid relative, which is a little tricky to explain, but look at this piece of audio. It's not exactly on bar 6, but when I move it, it keeps it locked relative to where it was, but still moves it in bar increments. Events. When you move this audio event around, it'll lock to the end time of this event or the start time of this event. The grid is bars and beats. Grid relative. Shuffle, which is a little tricky to explain, but look at this piece of audio. Which allows you to move. It's not exactly on bar 6, but when I move it, it keeps it locked relative to where it was, but still moves it in bar increments. Events. When you move this audio event around, it'll lock and magnetic to the end time of this event, the event that is being moved to snap or the start time of this event. Bars and beats. Grid relative. Shuffle, which is a little tricky to explain, but look at this piece of audio. The other three are just combinations which allows you to move. It's not exactly on bar 6, but when I move it, it keeps it locked relative. Let's begin by explaining to where it was, but still moves it in bar increments. Grid, the event will now lock to the grid. You may ask, well, what grid? When you move this audio event around, it'll lock and magnetic to the end time of this event, the event that is being moved to or the start time of this event. Now when we want to move an event, it snaps to bars. Bar 5, bar 6, back to bar 4. If we want to get it to snap to smaller divisions, choose beat from the grid selector. Now let's choose Use Quantize. To the right of the grid selector, we can pick eighth notes from the Quantize selector. Now we can move this audio event around in eighth note increments. As you can see, snapping is very easy to understand, yet extremely powerful. I'm going to explain grid mode in more detail. This will help explain the next two boxes over here. When you use something other than bars and beats, for example, let's say timecode or seconds, you'll notice that this menu item's changed. We can now move or snap our audio events in 1 millisecond increments, 10 milliseconds, 100 milliseconds, etc. We can change it to samples. And now we can move our audio event in 1 sample, 10 samples, 100 samples, etc. Once again, snapping is easy to use, easy to understand, yet very powerful. There are 9 different types of tracks in Cubase. Let's find out how to add some. You might notice there is a button at the top of the window below the menu called Show Inspector. Let's toggle this on and off. If you don't have this button, you may need to see the video on customizing Cubase. If you don't have this button, you may need to see the video on customizing Cubase because you'll need to show something called View Switches. It's important to show you this because there are 2 empty gray windows here. One is for the inspector, which you'll see in a second, and the other is where the tracks go. Right-click on the second window and choose Add MIDI Track. For Mac users with one button, you can use the Control key to simulate the right-click. You can see that the tracks appear here, and the information for the track appears over here. This is known as the inspector. Now let's add an audio track. Choose Project, Add Track, Audio. You get a choice whether the track can be mono, stereo, or multi-channel. Let's just choose stereo. Let's add a marker track and move it up to the top. Here we can add markers with the draw tool and jump to them easily by pressing their corresponding numbers on the transport bar. Now add a folder track. You can place tracks in the folder by clicking on the track and dragging it in. And then you can close up the folder. This is useful when you have a lot of tracks and want to save some space. You can keep the drums all together in one folder, the guitars in another folder, etc. We can add a ruler track, which allows us to see your timeline in a variety of formats. Add another one and move them around. Have one show seconds by clicking here, and the other show time code. You can even put them all at the top if you like. That should give you a quick introduction on how to handle tracks. Now let's look at the transport panel in Cubase. The transport panel can be selected from the transport menu if you can't see it. The key command for it is F2. There are familiar controls here such as rewind, fast forward, loop or cycle, stop, start, and record. If you like a click when you record or play back, you can turn it on or off here. Here's a little tip. If you want one tempo for the whole entire project, you can turn off the tempo track and punch in your own desired tempo here. When the tempo track in Cubase is on, Cubase reads tempo changes from the tempo track, found under the project menu. We're going to keep this off and have a fixed tempo of 110 beats per minute. You can select your markers here, show the MIDI in and MIDI out activity, and even see your audio in and audio out activity. Something really handy here is a master fader for your volume output. On the other side, we have real-time jog and shuttle dials, some advanced functions for recording, and you can select whether automatic quantize for your MIDI will be turned on or off here. This section lets you numerically set in your locators and turn on the punch in and punch out buttons. If you're not sure what locators are these. If you want to create a small loop from bar 2 to 3, you can draw it in right here. You can see we have our left locator on bar 2 and our right locator on bar 3. This is verified by seeing it numerically here. If you set your cycle button to on and then press the play button, you can then use your locators to loop a section over and over. If for any reason your transport bar doesn't look exactly like mine, make sure you see the video on customization. Make sure you watch the previous videos as this builds on the previous knowledge learned. Let's make an audio track and assign an input to it. I have a drum beat coming in inputs 1 and 2. I've set up my VST connections and called my input drums. So let's choose it here. If you don't see this window, remember to make sure the inspector is open. Your next step is to get the track ready to record. This is done by clicking on the Record Enable button. There's an option in the Preferences, under the File menu in the Editing submenu, that allows you to enable record on selected tracks. I like to have this turned off, or else the Record Enable button will change tracks on you as you select another track. So far we have everything set up. We just need to hear the audio coming in. We can see the meters moving up and down by the transport panel, but we can't hear anything. Let's turn on the monitor button now. We're ready to record drums. But first, let's turn it off and talk about some other things. The record enable button will change tracks on you as you select the video on audio and MIDI setup. Well, if you have direct monitoring turned on in the VST audio bay, then the audio that is plugged into your sound card inputs will be directly sent to your outputs. Of course, Cubase will get the audio too, so it can record, but you will hear exactly what is going into your inputs. If you turn direct monitoring off, then you can hear effects in real time that are on the recording track or on the input faders. Which now brings us to input faders. Call up the mixer under the Devices menu or press F3. Make sure this button is not highlighted so we can see the inputs. These are the VST inputs that you made in the VST Connections window. Most of this stuff is explained in the upcoming video on the mixer, but I'll let you know. So far we have everything set up. From your sound card dry, meaning whatever comes in will be recorded to hear the audio coming in. Or you can add some EQ. We can see the meters moving up and down by the transport in, as we say, wet. Or I can put a compressor or but we can't hear anything. Generally you want to let's turn on the monitor button now. Change the sound later. But if you know what you're doing, this can be a great feature. Okay, enough of that. Let's record something. Turn off the loop and let's we're ready to record drums. But first, let's turn it off. The record enable button will change tracks on you as you select the video on audio and MIDI setup. Don't forget the monitor button. If you have direct monitoring turned on in the VST. Now press stop. Turn off the record enable button and the monitor button. Let's listen back to see what we've just recorded. Continue on to the next video on recording to learn more. Every program has a place that shows all the audio and video files being used. Cubase calls that area the pool. You can get there by choosing Project and then Pool, or by pressing this button here. You have three main folders in the pool: Audio, Video, and the Trash. Obviously, when you record or import audio, audio goes here. When you have video in your project, the file is listed here. And when you decide to erase audio or video files on the project window without erasing them from your hard drive, they go into the trash. This trash bin in no way is related to your operating system trash or recycle bin. Once you erase something in this trash bin, you can't get it back. Rule of thumb, don't erase anything until you know how to, or you're absolutely sure you don't need it. With the price of hard drives these days being so low, you can record all day long and not really worry about filling up your hard drive. Because of this, don't erase anything until you are sure at the very end of your project once the song is finished. Let's import some audio into the pool. There's a feature in the preferences for importing audio. Let's go there now before we do anything else. Then choose Audio under the Editing submenu. On Import Audio Files, we have two options. Let me explain these. If you switch to Use Settings, then you have three settings to pick from. The first one, Copy Files to Working Directory, does exactly what it says. When you import audio or drag and drop it in, the audio file will be copied to your project audio folder. Very convenient, right? This feature alone saves time later looking for lost audio files. The next feature, will convert and copy the audio files if needed. This means that if you are bringing in an audio file that is 44.1 and your project is 48 kHz, then Cubase will automatically convert and copy the file into the project directory. The last setting is for any type of file that is not a mono file. For example, stereo or surround sound. Let's use a stereo file as an example. This will basically split the audio file up. If it's a stereo audio file, it'll split the file into 2 mono separate files. Now let's switch to Open Options dialog. This prompts you every time you bring in an audio file. I like this feature because I like being prompted every time to know exactly what the audio files are doing as I'm importing them. Let's close this window and import some audio files now. Look on your hard drive for the audio files. You can audition your audio files before you import them. Look on your hard drive for audio files. You can audition audio files before you import them. Now that we've found some audio files to import, we can do them one at a time or select multiple files. I'm going to pick all of these and click Open. Remember when we chose Open Options dialog in the preferences? Well, this is the window that popped up. The 3 options that appear in front of us are the same ones that are in the preferences. I'll click these 2 and choose OK. Now it's copying all the files I chose into my working project directory, and it's automatically converting the files, if needed, to match my project settings. We can also drag and drop audio files into the pool or project. Let's drag this file into the pool and another file into the project window. You can see that when I drag and drop a file, a slightly different window pops up. If the file was different in sample rate, sample size, 16, 20, or 24 bits, then you can choose these options here. If they are grayed out, then they match the project settings like they do here. If you choose Do Not Ask Again, then Use Settings in the Preferences will be chosen. Click OK and then look in your preferences. You can see that this has switched to Use Settings because we chose Do Not Ask Again. If you don't want to be asked again in the future, then just click these 2 on. I generally keep this last one off because I can always split files later on. But generally I never need to split files, so I just leave this one. Let's click OK and drag and drop a file onto the project window. As I decide to drop the file, you can see real-time spotting. This lets you decide where exactly the file will be placed. Right now we are seeing it based on bars and beats. Snap plays a role in this too. Let's turn on Snap and you can see I'm locking to bars now. You can see as I'm about to drag this audio file, it's snapping to the bar. Let's place it on bar 1. It's great that you can drag an audio file, snap it, moving it to the different bars, and when you let it go, the audio file gets copied into your folder and converted if needed. That's awesome. We're going to do some basic MIDI editing right now. I have a MIDI recording and I'm about to record the bass part. I'm going to purposely make some mistakes so we can edit them later. Let's start recording. Let's go into the key editor by selecting Open Key Editor from the MIDI menu. This is your basic piano roll editor. You can see the pitch of the MIDI here and the length of the MIDI here. Down at the bottom of the screen we can see our controllers. It usually defaults to velocity, which is the individual volume of the notes. We can use some of the tools here to make changes and add in notes. For example, use the Object Selection tool, or the Arrow tool, and pick a note and move it either up or down and or left and right. This tool can also be used to lengthen your notes and or start. The Draw tool can be used to draw in new notes or edit the controller data below. Now let's hear what we've just edited by playing it back. We can edit solo this so that we just hear what we're editing. I'm going to get it back to the original by undoing it. This time I'm going to use the key command Ctrl-Z to undo it. Now we still have some notes that don't sound right. Let's fix them. It's these last ones right here. What I'm going to do is grab the arrow selection tool, highlight them all, and move it down to the proper note. That should be it. Let's rewind and listen to this. We can actually erase this note right here. Grab our eraser and lengthen this note right to bar 5. Grab the arrow selection tool. I'm going to get it back to the original by undoing it. This time I'm going to use the key command Control. And there's some quick MIDI editing for you. Key commands are found under the File menu. There is a long list of key commands, and looking for a particular function might take a while. If you are looking for a key command to activate play order, you might want to use the search function at the top of this window. Type in activate. You don't have to type in the full name, it'll search with partial characters. Press the search button. If it's not what you're looking for, press it again and again until you find it. Once found, you can add a key command by clicking in this window and typing your key command in. I'll choose Ctrl-Shift-A. Notice that this key command is already assigned to Edit Select None. Choose Alt-Shift-A instead. This key command is okay to use because the Assign To is blank. Nothing's assigned to it. Now press the Assign key above to lock Alt-Shift-A to activate. You can go about this the other way. Let's say you know the key command, but want to find it in the list. Type the key command F3 in the same window, and then press Select. It selects it on the left. If we want to keep this key command, but also make it Shift F3, then we can type that in and assign it above. Now we have two key commands for the same function. This is great when you're working between programs or if multiple peoples are using the same computer. Now in reality, if different people are using the same program on the same computer, you might disagree on the key commands in use. You can store presets and recall them. This is great for transferring key commands between computers. With this button, you can import older Cubase version key commands. Now let's move on to macros. Press this button to show macros. I'm going to make my window a little bigger too. Macros are so that you can have many commands or functions under one key command. Let's begin by making a new macro. Call it My Macro. Now let's say we want to select from the cursor to the end of the project. So add that command. Then we want those events deleted. So add that command. And then we want to save our project. So add that one. Now we have 3 commands under one macro. The only thing left to do is add a key command to this macro. Scroll until you find macro, and then you'll find My Macro. Add a key command to this. I'll choose Ctrl-Alt-M. Now whenever we choose Ctrl-Alt-M, it will now run this macro and perform 3 commands, all with one key command. The VST Connections window is an area in Cubase where you can define all your audio inputs, outputs, group effects, and external effects. It is found in the Devices menu or by pressing the key command F4. The first thing you'll probably want to do is make sure you have some audio inputs so you can record. Make sure you watch the video on audio and MIDI setup so that you have your audio card properly set up first. Let's say you have a keyboard with stereo outputs hooked up to your sound card into inputs 1 and 2, or left and right. You'll want to create a stereo bus to accommodate this. Let's remove any buses that we already have here and start from scratch. Select the bus, right-click, and choose Remove Bus. You can say yes to this. It's just saying that this bus is in use somewhere in Cubase, but don't worry because we're going to make our own new ones. Click the Add Bus button and add a stereo bus. For our example, we are hooking up our keyboard's outputs to the stereo 1 and 2 inputs of our sound card, so we don't need to change anything under the device port. Inputs 1 and 2 are automatically selected for us, but we could change them here if we needed to. You've probably noticed that I have lots of inputs on my sound card. You may only have 2, maybe 4 or 8. Let's just move ahead assuming that you have more than 2 inputs on your sound card. If you don't have any more inputs, then this is all the setup you'll need to do. We can name the input by double-clicking here. Let's call it Keys. Now suppose we have a microphone hooked up to input 3 on our sound card. Let's make another bus, but this time we'll make it mono. Set the input to number 3. Now if you only have 2 inputs, left and right, you can do this. Set the input to the first input or the left side. Let's call it mic. If you have multiple inputs, you can name each one and have a different input assigned to it. And then of course, plug all of our gear into the different inputs of our sound card. If you only have 2 inputs, you'll need to plug and then unplug your gear into your sound card. So the input names won't really make sense if they're labeled keys and mic. Why don't we make them more generic by calling them stereo and mono? These names will now pop up in the mixer or in the input section of the inspector. See the video on recording audio and the mixer coming up. You can even have a 5.1 surround sound input bus. Let's say you were recording a surround mix of 6 channels. Click on the Add bus and choose 5.1, and then select your inputs. All the same stuff I've just showed you with the inputs can be done with the outputs. Once you have the perfect setup, you'll probably want to store presets. The inputs and the outputs have individual preset selections. It's good not to have a whole bunch of inputs and outputs turned on and running. This uses up a small bit of processing power that can become noticeable if you have a large project running. By using presets, you can have inputs for just your drums, just guitars, vocals, etc. Only use what you need, then turn it off. One interesting thing to note here is that if you have a stereo audio file and you are sending it to a multi-channel bus, such as a 5.1 bus, you can create something called child buses. When you create a child bus, it acts like a stereo sub-bus within the bus. Confused? Well, for example, if you have a stereo audio file, you can send it easily to the left and right surround outs. This makes things so much easier. You can also define a default input. This is used whenever you make a new audio track input. Group and effects are covered in Volume 2 of this series. External effects are covered in Volume 3. The last tab, Studio, is for when you are auditioning audio. For example, when you're in the sample editor and you want to hear what you are editing, but don't want to hear it through effects or through the main outputs, you can define what output your auditioning will go out to. In addition to this, there is a master fader for your auditioning in the mixer so that you can control the level. In terms of connectivity, Cubase has this covered. Now let's look at the different tools. You can select the tools by clicking on the Tools section at the top of the project page, or by right-clicking on the event display on the project page. The first tool is actually 3 tools. The little arrow indicates that there is more than one tool found here. The first one is Normal Sizing, Sizing moves contents, and Sizing applies time stretch. The arrow tool, or object selection tool, has many purposes. For example, you can pick up events and move them around. You can trim the left and right ends of an event by clicking on the bottom white squares. Change the volume of the audio event by clicking on the blue top square. Notice that the volume changes are reflected in the info line above. You can also easily add a fade in or fade out by clicking on the blue triangles in the upper corners of the event. The Sizing moves contents allows you to move the contents of the audio event while resizing. For example, if I click and drag the left side of the audio file remains in view while the right side is changing, and vice versa. Sizing applies time stretch is used for quick and easy time stretching. A tip here is to make sure that the snap is on so that your time stretching will lock to bars or beats, speeding up things even more. The range selection tool is used for many purposes. It basically selects a range and allows you to either edit, process, cut, copy, or move media. If you select something and then drag it away, it moves that selection. If you hold down the Alt key, you can copy that selection. You can range select across multiple tracks and use Control to deselect and reselect individual tracks. If you right-click on the selection you've made, you can now process the selection with one of the audio processes or with plugins. The Split tool allows you to cut media. If you hold down Alt while you are splitting or cutting, you can get multiple repeated splits in the size of the first split. The glue gun will glue these splits back together. The eraser tool erases. The zoom tool allows you to zoom in and out. Click, hold, drag, and then release lets you zoom in. There is a preference that you can set for zooming. Go to Preferences under the File menu. And then select the Editing submenu. You can check or uncheck this preference. Horizontal zooming only. I personally don't like it and choose to keep it unchecked. Now when you zoom in or out, it'll do a vertical and horizontal zoom at the same time. To zoom out, press the Control key and click. Multiple clicks will zoom all the way out. I always seem to get this question: how do I clean up my project and manage my audio files? I'm going to run through the main steps only. If you follow these steps, you should have no problems with audio files. There are two different ways we can do this. The first one is this: save project to a new folder. The original project we are working on will be kept the same, untouched, and a new one will be created on the hard drive someplace else. It's this new project that we can move around, send to a studio, and get mixed, etc. The second way we can achieve this is clean up the project that we currently have, making destructive edits, erasing all the audio we don't need anymore, and copying all the files into one single location. Once again, there's two ways to do it. So let's talk about the first way right now. Save project to new folder. We have a project and we're going to make a copy of this on another part of the hard drive. Go to the File menu and pick Save Project to New Folder. Find a spot on your computer that you want to copy this project to. Press the Create button and name the new project folder. Once you do that, make sure it's highlighted and press OK. You'll probably want to rename this new backup project and take care of three things here. I'm going to rename mine Cubase Project Backup. The first item we have here is minimizing audio files. This means that if you aren't using certain sections of the audio file, they will be trimmed away. Remember, this won't affect your original audio file, just the copy going into the new folder. Freeze edits means if there's any audio processing on the audio file, it can be frozen, meaning it will become permanent. This applies to things like offline processing. Remove unused files means that if you aren't using certain audio files, they won't be copied over to the new project folder. This first method, Save Project to New Folder, is great because your original project is untouched, and now you have a second copy of the project to play with. We're almost done looking at all the features of the pool. Now let's finish it off. If you want to rename an audio file in the pool, select the audio file and then click on it. Rename it and then press return. If the pool gets too big and you want to do some house cleaning, you can create folders. Right-click and choose Create Folder. This doesn't make a new folder on the hard drive, but allows you to see and organize better in the pool. Just drag the files into the new folder. A cool thing with this is that you can pick a folder so that the next time you record the audio files, it'll go into that folder. Let's just pretend we're going to record drums next. Right-click on the drums folder and choose Set Pool Record Folder. See how the status column now says Record beside the drums folder? This is an unbelievably handy feature. When you right-click, you can import files with the Import Media option, the same as the Import button on the toolbar. You can import directly off the CD too. These two features allow you to export and save the pool. You never know when you might need this feature. If you get a question mark beside a file under the status column, you can search for the files here. If you can't find the file or you've deleted, you can click Remove Missing Files. I'll skip Reconstruct for now as this is in the next pool video. Choosing Convert Files is great for converting a file into whatever you like. You can change the sample rate, the sample width, the number of channels, and the file format. You have three options. You can create new files, which basically creates a copy of the file and converts it. Your song will still point to the old unconverted file though. Replace files is what you will commonly use because it changes the file and doesn't make a copy. The last one is new and replace in the pool. This will create a copy of the file, convert it, and then your song reference will point to the newly converted file. Your original unconverted file will be left in the pool. If you've done this lots of times before and you know exactly what you're doing, then choose Replace Files. Or if you're new to Cubase and kind of unsure, then definitely use New and Replace in Pool. Sometimes you don't even need to choose Convert Files. All you need is Conform Files. You may have dragged in some files and their file attributes are not the same as your project settings. Use Conform Files to change this. Another reason you might want to use this feature is that if you decided to change your project from 16-bit to 32-bit. Let's do this now. Choose Project and then Project Setup. Change the record format to 32-bit float. Click OK. Now our project is at 32-bit. But our audio files are still at 16-bit, as we can see here. Choose Conform Files. A dialog may pop up saying that if you have done any processing to the files, then all the editing will become frozen or locked into the file, essentially meaning that you can't undo it. Another dialog box like this one might come up and say, do you want to keep the source files in the pool directory? This basically means that you can keep and have the original files untouched, and the new files are created that conform or match to the project settings. I just want everything converted to 32-bit, I don't want it to keep anything else, so I'm going to hit the Replace button. Gives you a little warning saying that you can't undo this. No problem, I want this done. Now you can see that they're all turned to 32-bit. Extract audio from video file separates the audio from a video file so you can use the audio track. See the next video on the pool for more. Continuing with the mixer, we have mute and solo buttons. Mute disables the sound but allows you to hear all the other tracks. The solo button mutes all the other tracks and lets you hear just the one you are on. Sometimes you can have a whole bunch of tracks soloed and muted, and it can be confusing trying to bring all the tracks back to normal. You can use the deactivate solo and unmute all buttons on the far left of this mixer to solve this problem. The next two buttons are used for read and write automation. This is covered in level 2 of this video series. The E button pops up the channel settings window. You can move to other tracks without closing this window and reopening it. You can do this in two ways. You can choose the track you want to view by pressing the triangle at the far bottom left of the window and selecting the track, or by pressing the left and right arrow keys on your keyboard. Let's close this window. Remember the record enable and monitor buttons when we were recording audio? Well, here they are again. The three buttons in the middle are for inserts, EQ, and sends bypass. Open up the channel settings window, and we can see those same three buttons right here. See, their lights have turned on now. I've just grabbed the drums group track and I've soloed it, just so that we have something to play with and I can adjust some things and you can see what's happening. Let's play this audio file and play with the EQ. You have 4 EQs that you can turn on. 1, 2, 3, and 4. You can grab the EQ points and move them around freely. You can also be more precise by moving the knobs below. Or you can type in the desired gain or frequency. There's also the Q setting at the bottom that allows you to set the amount of curve on the EQ slope. I'm just going to stop it here. Now the low and high EQs, or numbers 1 and 4, are different than the middle two because you can change these to low shelf, high pass, and high shelf or low pass. You can make presets here, name it to your liking, and reset the EQ here. Inserts can be added like compression, and sends can be used for send effects, or as extra outputs like headphone monitors. There are 3 great videos on advanced mixing in level 2 of this video series. Let's record some MIDI now. First, let's make a track and call it drums. Let's get some drum sounds. Go to the VST Instruments under the Devices menu, and in the first open slot, choose LM7 from the Drums menu. This loads up the LM7. We won't need to see this, so let's get rid of it. And for appearance sake, let's just fold up these folders. Let's set the output of this track so it goes to the LM7. And then let's set its input. This input will definitely be different on your computer. Pick the MIDI in that your keyboard is connected to. Press the record enable button so we can hear our MIDI as we play on the keyboard, and so it will record on the track. I'm going to play something right now. We learned how to loop and snap in the previous videos. We also mentioned automatic quantize in the video on transport. I'm going to talk about them now. Let's get a loop going from bars 1 to 5 and then start recording. I'm going to turn snap on so that my right locator locks to bar 5. You'll definitely want to have the click on while you're recording, and you'll want to have a 2-bar count in just before you start recording, so you can start on time. That's what the pre-count button is for. To set your click preferences, go to Transport and choose Metronome Setup. For our 2-bar count in, we can set the pre-count bars right here. And we can set our level right here. Let's press the record button and start recording some drums. Let's take off the click and stop recording. As you can hear, my timing's just a little bit off. I'm going to erase this, turn on the automatic quantize, and re-record this drum beat. The quantize grid, which is discussed in the video on Snap, is set to 16th notes. This is a perfect setting for most MIDI that you'll record. With our automatic quantize button on, things should lock in time and sound great. Now that was much better. The automatic quantize locked it completely on time for us. Now if you're still a little unsure, let's make this super obvious. What I'm going to do is erase this and record some hi-hats for you now. I'm going to play the hi-hats as fast as I can, but since the automatic quantize is locked to 16th notes, Cubase will play it back only on the 16th note beat. Let's hit the rewind button and then press record. That sounds a lot better, nice and tight. Let's finish this off with a little bit of kick and snare. Understanding how to loop in Cubase can be a major time saver for you. I'm going to go over the various looping procedures. I'm also going to talk a lot about the left and right locator and how to move them around to help you loop. Let's start off tough. We're going to do the hardest ways to loop first, and then we'll get to the good stuff. Look at the left and right locator. They're positioned at bar 2 and 3. We have our drum loop positioned at bar 5 to 7. Now, so far I've set it the tempo so that it is exactly lined up with our drum loop. Don't really worry about that right now. I just want to show you how to loop. In level 3 of this video series, I go through beat detection and time warp and hit points and all the good stuff, so make sure you see the video on that. Now let's grab the transport bar, move it up here, and what we're going to do is set the left locator to bar 5 and then the right locator to bar 7. Now once again, I'm just showing you the longest, sort of hardest way to do this, but we'll get to the good stuff soon. Now make sure the loop button is on. Actually, Cubase calls it the cycle button, but we commonly refer to it as the loop, or the cycle. It doesn't really matter. Now Cubase says it's going to begin playing at bar 1. What I want to do is press the L right here, and now my cursor has jumped to bar 5. You can see it right there. Now when we press the play button, it's going to loop for us. I have the click button turned on. Let's just turn it off. So that's one way to get looping done. Let's move this audio file over here, and let's get the loop to go right here. What we can do is if we hold down the Control key and click at bar 3, it moves the left locator over. To move the right locator, hold down the Alt key and click at bar 5. Now we can take our cursor and just click right at bar 3, and then hit the play button. Okay, now let's move this loop once again somewhere else. And you can see we can actually drag the loop anywhere we like. We can also do this. Let's move this guy over here. If we go a little bit higher on the ruler area until it turns into a pencil, we can actually draw in our left to our right locator. Now it just so happens that I have snapping turned on. That's why you see it sort of snapping to the bars here. I've just done that to make it easier for me. Now would you believe it? There's even more ways to loop. Let's grab this audio file, put it right there. And what I can do is press the P key on my keyboard. All right, here I'm going to press P. See, the left and right locators automatically go around the part that I've selected. I'm going to make a copy of this. What if I had two parts here? You can select them and then hit P. There we go. Now let's just erase the second part I've made. Oh, I've erased both. Let's click just on this one right there. There's an even easier way to loop, and if you've owned Cubase for a while, you might have even missed this feature. It's called loop selection, or the Shift-G command. So all you do is just grab your audio file and click on Shift-G. Now this is great because, here, I'll show you this again. What it does is it moves the left and right locator over to our loop point. If loop is off, it turns it on. It takes our cursor and puts it at the beginning of the loop, and then it presses play. So it's doing quite a lot. Let's do Shift-G again. Let's move it over here and press Shift-G. Move it over here, Shift-G. It's an amazing command. A more advanced feature for this would be if you were zoomed out way over here. Let's grab this and put it at bar 37 and then zoom in. Now see, we can't see bar 1 anymore. But what I want to do is just loop this really quickly right here. All right, let's stop that. Now I want to take my start time for this audio file. I'm going to double click here. And I'm going to make it bar 1. Then I'm going to hit enter. Now right now the audio file has jumped from bar 37 to bar 1. Make sure this button is turned on right here. This is called the auto scroll. Now let's think about this for a moment. When I press Shift-G in a moment, the left and right locator are going to go around my audio vent, which is at bar 1. the cursor is going to jump to bar 1, the loop button's going to turn on, and the play button's going to start. Now because the auto scroll button's on, that means my window is going to automatically scroll over to bar 1 and bar 2. Let's do that right now. Now here's a little trick that I learned. You can actually create a skip loop. You can take your loop and drag it over here, then take the left locator and drag it past the right locator. Now I'm just going to zoom out a bit here. Make sure the loop button's on or else it won't skip this section. Let's start playing from bar 4 and let's see what happens. Watch as it gets to 6, it's going to jump straight to 8. This is great because if you want to delete a section, you can kind of see, okay, well if I skip from here to here, is it going to sound good? And if it does, hey, that's great. Now you can erase the part you don't want. Okay, now for the second way. There are going to be a lot of steps in this one. I'm only going to show you the things you need. This way assumes, and I'm giving you lots of caution here, that every time you made a project, you made it in a new folder. I've seen so many people make multiple projects in the same folder over and over and over. If you're afraid that you might erase some audio files, do the first method that I described earlier in the previous video, and practice on the newly created folder. If you're a pro and feel very confident that you're not going to erase valuable files and that you even have them backed up, then go on ahead. Ask Video accepts no responsibility for lost files due to Steinberg software, your computer, your own use from this instructional video, and/or knowledge and any other unforeseen factors. Okay, now that that's out of the way, let's move ahead with this method. Step 1. Go to File and choose Preferences. Go to Audio under the Editing submenu. Make sure Open Options dialog is picked under On Import of Audio Files. Then click OK. Step 2. Go to the Pool under the Project menu and press the Import button. Go to the audio folder of the project you are working on and select every audio file in that folder. Now press Open. Make sure you check Copy Files to Working Directory. If you want to convert them, feel free, otherwise check Do Not Ask again, and then press OK. This is the boring part. If you have hundreds of audio files, you're going to have to press Reuse a lot of times. The reason you're doing this is because there are files that sometimes are left in the audio folder that may not be in Cubase's pool window. This means that they are taking up space on your audio folder, and you don't even know that they're there. What we're doing is making sure you get everything by doing this step. Now here's the scary part. If you've been really bad with file management in the past, you may have files in this project that are supposed to be in other projects. Hence, you might delete them by accident. That's why you might want to do the first method in the other video that I've shown you before moving on. Now this is the last time I'm warning you about audio file loss. Make sure all your audio files are backed up so you don't lose anything. Alright, now step 3. Right-click on the audio folder and choose Prepare Archive. If you're asked to freeze edits, choose No. This step will copy any external audio files into this project's audio folder. Okay, now step 3. Right-click on the audio folder and choose Remove Unused Media, then choose Trash. Step 4. Right-click on the trash and choose Empty Trash, and then choose Erase. The files that you don't need should be erased now. you might get a dialog box popping up saying, "Error, some audio files were not deleted." Click on OK and then right-click on the trash again and choose Empty Trash. Then choose Remove from Pool. Only a couple steps left now. Step number 5. Select all your files under the audio folder. You can do this by shift-clicking, control-clicking, drag-clicking, any way you know how. And then right-click on the files, not the audio folder, and choose Minimize File. Press the Minimize button. Save your project now, just like Cubase recommends. You should now have a completely cleaned up project without any excess audio vents, any excess audio files, and with all your audio files in one location. Practice these steps and read up in the manual all the rationale behind these steps. The time you spend learning on file management will make all the difference later. It is so important you learn this stuff. To take advantage of all the features in Cubase, you should know how you can customize the application. As you're watching these tutorials, you may see buttons that aren't there. Learning how to customize will reveal these options. Let's begin with the transport bar. When you right-click on the transport bar, Control-click for Mac users, you'll see a whole list of options that are available to the transport bar. Here you can pick which ones will be displayed or not. Let's get rid of the jog and scrub dials. Now let's get rid of the markers. You can choose to see all the options, or you can pick Cubase's default options. We have a few presets here we can pick from. Just the transport buttons, or the buttons and the time display. Let's switch back to the default and choose Setup. In this window, you can pick which items are visible or which ones are hidden. Let's move this window down so we can actually see the transport bar at the same time. Hide the record mode by moving it over to the Hidden Items column. You can make the play order visible by adding it over to the Visible Items column. If we don't like where play order is, we can move it around by pressing the Move Up or Move Down buttons. If we want to store this as a preset, press the Disk button and name your preset. You can also delete presets with this button here. Click OK, and now let's see where the preset is. Right above the Setup button below Cubase's presets are the presets we've made. We've only got one in there right now, but as you add more, the list will grow. Now let's look at customizing the project page. You can do all the same things as we did in the transport panel. We can right-click on this top bar here and select the options we want to view. We also have options we can pick, some presets, and a setup window. Remember, you can change the order that they appear in with the Move Up and Move Down buttons. Once again, this is the same as the transport panel. The sample editor, the audio part editor, the key editor, the tempo track, the score editor, just about every single window in Cubase can be customized to your liking. See how when we move the track window to make it bigger, the buttons move. What if we don't like this? Or what if we want to make the name window longer? This can be changed by pressing this button here and selecting Track Control Settings. At the top, you can pick what type of track you want to change. You can change their options and remove some of them from the list so you don't see them. You can change their order with the Move Up and Move Down buttons, and even group them. I'm going to explain grouping more closely. When you group buttons together, they stay together. Let's look at the Record Enable and Monitor button. When I move the window, these two buttons stay together. This is because I've selected these two with the controller shift keys and press Group. Their group number appears here. These are part of Group 1, these ones to Group 2, and these ones to 3. If you want all your buttons on top of each other in groups and don't want them to wrap, then uncheck this option. This is with wrap controls turned off. And this is with wrap controls turned on. I want the name for this track to be Bob's Fat Bass. See how the name gets cut off? We can make this bigger by increasing the value here. Let's put it to 100 and press OK. See? It's gotten bigger. There are quite a few customizable features in Cubase, but I'm only going to show one more for this tutorial. Make your way to the preferences found under the File menu. At the top left of the window, you'll see Appearance. You can change the basic appearance scheme of Cubase. Each time you pick an option here, it adds subtle color variations to Cubase. You can change your work area brightness. That's this color here. The cycle intensity. See how this got darker? The horizontal grid intensity. Those are the lines between the tracks. The vertical grid level 1 are the bars. Level 2 are the beats. And level 3 are the 16th note divisions. I'm going to press the Defaults button to get it back to the way it was. You can do the same for the editor windows, and there are two extra options for the key editor and the drum editor. In the key editor, the black keys for the piano roll can be increased so that you can draw the notes in with more accuracy. In the drum editor, the active drum lane can be made more visible by increasing its intensity. That's a lot of customizing power. Let's look at the last 6 tools. The Mute tool mutes events. You can also click, drag, and release to mute and unmute multiple parts. If there are some parts muted and some not muted, when you click, drag, and release, the muted parts will become unmuted and the unmuted parts will become muted. The time warp tool is explained in volume 3 of this video series, but essentially you can warp Cubase's tempo by holding down Shift in the main editing area and inserting tempo changes. You can erase the tempo changes by holding Shift in the ruler area. Once you have tempo changes, you can move them around without holding Shift down. The Draw tool is used in combination with the next tool. You can use the Draw tool for different things. For example, if you need to draw in an empty MIDI part on a MIDI track, use the Draw tool. For audio tracks, you can use the Draw tool for automation. Like I said, the next button is used in combination with the Draw tool. I can pick sine waves, lines, parabolas, triangles, or square waves when drawing in automation and other data. Next, we have the Scrub and Play tool. You can scrub the audio file depending on how fast you move the mouse. In the Preferences under the File menu, you can adjust the speed of the Scrub tool. This is found under the VST submenu. I like to keep my speed on max. You can switch the Scrub tool to the Play tool and play audio events. The last tool is the Color tool. You can pick a color by clicking below the icon and then coloring the part or the event. A shortcut for picking different colors is to hold down the Control key and then the color selection window pops up. You can also sample colors with the Alt key and then use them on another track. The tracks themselves can have a color assigned to them. When you press this button, an extra selection window opens up, allowing you to pick a color for each track. Let's look at the differences for part and event colors and track colors. You can see that I have these tracks colored blue and yellow. And these parts are a variety of colors. Use part colors to outline different sections. You could use them like verse and chorus, etc. Now use track colors to group types of instruments together. All the drums one color, all the guitars another color, etc. Now look in the mixer. The colors you chose for the tracks are shown. This makes looking at the mixer with a larger project easier. If you turn off the track colors on the project page, the colors won't be shown on the mixer. One thing I love is that if you have a wheel on your mouse, you can scroll through the colors. Try it. Just point and then scroll with the wheel. Now let's go through some basic audio editing. I have a drum loop that will cut up and loop. Doing this will cover a lot of features. First, I want to talk about zooming in and out. Let's make this track as big as we can. If you click on the ruler and drag up and down, you'll be able to zoom in and out. Be careful while you're moving. This way of zooming is super fast and accurate. It can take a little while to get used to. There's too much audio here, so let's cut most of it away and just have about 4 bars. Make sure the auto scroll button is on so that the cursor stays in view. I'm going to zoom in a bit and play it. I think I'm going to pick this spot right in here. Let's listen one more time and find the beginning. Right there. We're going to listen one more time, but this time I'm going to grab the split tool, and as it plays, I'm going to cut where I want it to start and end. That should be the spot. Let's just rewind back a bit because the auto scroll button was on. The great thing about Cubase is you don't have to get precise with your cuts. This is because you can trim the left and right sides to get it just right. Now as I was cutting, I had the snap turned on. You might find that you're not going to get the exact cut you want if this button is on. So let's turn it off. Now I can cut just about any place I like. Since I want to keep this middle section, let's erase the left and the right side of this audio event. As a small little side note here, Cubase has amazing sample accuracy when it comes to zooming. Let's zoom in right at this part right here. Look at that, we're viewing one single sample right here. Let's turn up this slider so we can increase the amplitude of it, and grab our split tool. Let's see how many cuts we can make on one single sample. As you can see, it's a little ridiculous. Cubase can just cut and cut and cut on one single sample so many different times. It's beyond anything we need. Let's undo some of these cuts using the Edit History window. That should do it right there. Let's pull the slider back down and zoom back out. We're going to zoom in at the beginning and the end of this audio file to make sure that we loop it and cut it exactly. I'm going to listen to it one more time just to make sure that this is the beginning and that this is the end. Alright, we've determined that this is the exact spot here, and it should play all the way through, and it should end right here, and our cut should be right there. Knowing this, we're going to zoom in at the beginning, and make our cut. Before we zoom in, let's once again increase the amplitude. We're going to have to zoom in a bit more. Now the funny thing about Cubase is that it allows you to zoom in so much that you might even get too much accuracy. You might be thinking, well, where do I cut? A good rule of thumb is cut where the sample, this little line right here, meets this straight line right here. Okay, I'm not going to get too technical on you, but basically if you cut up here, you're going to get a little click sound. If you cut down here, you're also going to get a little click sound. So it's good to cut where these guys meet each other. Anywhere along here. I guess right there would be a good clean spot. Let's grab the split tool and make our cut. Now sometimes you can't get complete accuracy, but this is more than enough. I'm going to zoom down and erase that little piece. Let's zoom out and zoom into the end. Now remember, this piece has got to go. What I can do is just cut it right here, erase it, and zoom in a little bit further. The reason I did this is I just want to show you an alternative method to trimming the end. Let's increase the end here. Now let's grab the end of this audio event, and remember, we can just use this. Sometimes this makes it a little easier. Now if we find that after we're looping this, that we trim too much off of the ending or the beginning, we can just grab these handles and get it just right. Let's pull this level down. Let's zoom out. Remember the video on looping where we can just say Shift G? Well, we can apply this here. We don't have to worry if this is right on time, bar 18 or 19. We just want to hear if the loop is okay. Once we know that, then we can position it anywhere. But first, let's just hit Shift G and see if it loops okay. Shift G. That sounds really good to my ears. To sum it up, it doesn't matter where we cut our audio in Cubase. We can always adjust it later. Let's take this to sort of the nth degree. Let's cut out this snare sound right here. Then what we can do is just trim the handles to the end of it and to the beginning of it. Now let's hear this part being taken out. We really don't have to worry about editing in Cubase. We can grab the handles, move it left or right, cut right down to sub-sample accuracy. It's really easy to edit audio in Cubase. You can move the columns around in the pool. You can decide what you like. There's a column called Used, which tells us all the audio files that are being used on the project page. Currently, I only have one, and it's being used once on the project page. If I were to copy this file and go back to the pool, you can see that it's being used twice now. There's also status, which gives you a ton of information on the file. We'll look at this a bit later. The path of the file name can be found here. You can see where the file on your hard drive is, the type of file it is, WAV, AFF, broadcast wave, etc., the date the file was made, the origin time, the time the file was originally recorded on the project page, a view of the image, and the real name, which if you're importing an OMF file may contain this attribute. The first button on the toolbar at the top of the pool window allows you to display the info line. Please use the info line as it tells you almost everything you need to know. It tells you how many audio files there are, how many are actually used on the project window, the total size you are taking up in your hard drive for your audio files in this project, and it shows you if there are any external files, files that are not copied into our project folder. Remember in part 1 of the pool video when I showed you how to drag and drop files into Cubase? Well, what if you didn't check the feature called Copy File to Working Directory? Let me explain this. Go to File, then Preferences. Choose Audio under the Editing submenu. Now choose Open Options dialog under On Import of Audio Files. then click OK. Drag and drop an audio file into the pool or on the project window. Uncheck Copy File to Working Directory. Now click OK. Can you see that it now says External Files 1? This is because the audio file that I brought in wasn't copied into my working project directory. This means that if I were to copy my project folder and then burn it onto CD, the external audio file, in my case Funky Bass, wouldn't be copied. Now wouldn't that be a bummer? I'm sure there's been many times where we've copied or burnt things, went over to a friend's house or in another studio, and we're missing a file. This immediately tells us that, hey, there's a potential that a file could be missing. It's an external file. It's great. This little info line is perfect. Make sure that it's turned on. Now, how do we copy this external file into our working directory? It's easy. Just right-click on the audio file in your audio folder and choose Prepare Archive. If a dialog box pops up that says Freeze Edits for Archive, choose No. In our case, this window didn't pop up, but it may when you've done processing to the audio file. Unless you want your processing edits to be made destructive or permanent, make sure you choose No. It's copied the files over into our working directory. Now we can hit OK. Something I should have pointed out was that the Funky Bass file that was an external file underneath the status column had an X on it. Whenever you see an X, that means that the file is an external audio file. Now the status window can show you 5 different things. It could be left blank. In this case, everything's fine, don't worry about it. It could have a WAV file with a red mark on it. This means that audio file has been processed. If there's a question mark, then the audio file is missing and can't be found. If there's an X, then this means that the audio file is an external audio file, which we know how to fix now. If you see an R that is white with a red background, this tells us that the audio file has been recently recorded in the currently open version of the project. Memorize these icons as they will save you time in the future. There's only a couple of them, so it doesn't take too long to memorize them. Continuing on the toolbar, we have a play button that is used for auditioning audio files, and a loop button to loop the playback. There's even a handy volume fader that can be used to adjust the volume of the auditioned audio file. You can choose View/Attributes, which allows you to view different columns. Choosing this menu allows you to pick the columns you want to see. You can turn them on or off. Next are the plus and minus buttons. They allow you to fold up all the folders or expand them all. The import button you already know, and the search button lets you search for audio files. Enter the name, pick the hard drive or the folder you want, and search for the file you are looking for. You can also audition files here and then import them if it's the right one. The mixer can be found under the Devices menu. Depending on what version of Cubase you have, or if you have Nuendo, you may see multiple mixers. This simply allows you to have a few mixers open at a time, displaying different things. For example, you could have one mixer showing inputs, one showing outputs, and another showing audio tracks. The mixer is basically divided up into 3 different sections: the inputs, the tracks, and then the outputs. You can hide and show everything. Let's hide the inputs, hide the audio tracks, and then hide the outputs. We have 2 other types of tracks here. We have group tracks here, we'll hide those, and effects channels, let's hide those. Now we have nothing. Let's bring it back to the way we had it by unhiding our tracks. Now we can move the two bars that divide the three sections of tracks. The inputs and the outputs can be added and removed through the VST Connections window, as explained beforehand. You can also reach the VST Connections window by pressing this button. The tracks found in this middle section are the tracks you create on the project page. Let's add a MIDI track on the project page. Then go back to our mixer. You can actually press this button here to get to the mixer. See that the MIDI track now appears in the mixer? Now let's hide the MIDI tracks for our mixer. You can create presets so that when you are hiding tracks and adjusting things, you can recall them. These presets are for the way things look. Don't get them confused with saving mixer settings like EQ and plugins. The mixer also has another three sections. They go from top to bottom. By pressing these buttons, I can show the basic mixer, which I actually can't get rid of, it's always shown, the extended mixer, and the input and output settings for each track. Let's go back to the way we had it. The record input for the track is set here, and the output is just below it. Let's add a group channel. The group channel allows you to group a whole bunch of tracks to one track, as in having a master fader for 8 drum tracks. Now let's assign one of the outputs of these channels to the group. Here's my outputs. There were some groups already created here. Here's the one I just made. Now this channel's output is going straight to my group, and then the group is going to our main output. Our main output happens to be called bus 1. That's not the best name for an output. Let's call it main out. Close this window, and you can see now the word appears at the top here. So once again, this audio track is going to my group. There it is there. And then my group is going to the main output. The input phase for the channel can be set here. This is really useful when you are dealing with input tracks. You could have 2 microphones coming in on a track, and one could be out of phase. Change the phase on input, and that way you can record it properly in phase. You can also have an extra gain stage to boost or decrease the track volume. You'll need to hold down Alt to make this knob turn though. It's set up like this so you won't change it accidentally. Below this are 2 small triangles on the left side that make the channel narrow or wide, and on the right side a single triangle. This allows you to make the channel a can hide channel. This means that I can mark this channel can hide, and then when I press this button, the can hide tracks are hidden. I use this all the time for virtual instruments that have too many outputs that I don't want to see. If the extended mixer button is on, then more options appear here. You can view various aspects about the channel in a larger, easier to see view. The panner is this line here. This allows you to move your audio around between your speakers, left and right and center. If you're having trouble getting it right back to center, hold down Control and click. The panner window allows you to see pan in 3 different ways, just by right-clicking on it. Stereo balanced power, stereo combined panner, and my favorite, stereo dual panner. Check out the manual for the differences between these 3, as it takes a little bit of explaining to understand all of them. Create folders next on the list, but I've already covered that in the last video. Moving on, empty trash. Let me show you how to erase things in the pool. You see this file here? It's being used once in this project. We can tell by the number 1 here. Now let's go to the project page and delete this file. An easy way to do this is to right-click on the file and choose Select in Project. There it is. Now let's click on it. Now press the Delete key on your keyboard. Go back to the pool and you'll see that the file doesn't have a number beside it anymore. Now let's delete the file in the pool by pressing the Delete key again. A dialog box pops up asking us what we want to do. You can delete the file to the trash, which just moves it to Cubase's trash bin. You can remove from pool, which means that it will be removed from this Cubase project, but the file will still be left on your hard drive. Right now I'm just going to press cancel. Let's do something really similar. What if you had a whole bunch of files that weren't being used, and you wanted to move them all to the trash? What you can do is right-click and select Remove Unused Media. This opens the same dialog box as before. This time select Trash. You'll notice that all the files that aren't being used have gone into the trash bin. Remember that this is not the trash bin or the recycle bin of the operating system. It's Cubase's trash bin, something separate. Now let's use the menu item Empty Trash. A slightly different dialog box pops up and asks us if you want to erase the files that are in the trash bin. Remove them from the pool, or cancel. If you say erase, you are permanently erasing the files from Cubase and your hard drive. Once you do this, there is no way to recover them. Only use this at the very end of your project when you're all done and finished, or if you're 100% sure you know what you're doing. Remove from pool once again simply removes the files from Cubase, but leaves them on your hard drive. I could press erase right now, but this will just erase them. Let me show you another little thing here. We're going to hit the cancel button. And if there's any files that are in our pool that we want to bring back to our audio folder because we thought, oh, I need the bass and the drums and the funky bass for something later, we can just click on them and drag them right back into our audio folder. I've already shown you these two, Prepare Archive and Set Pool Record Folder, in the other pool videos. Minimize File is next. This is used when you want to erase unused portions of an audio file. Look at this file here. We only need this small portion. Let's go back into the pool by pressing Ctrl F. Ctrl F not only opens the pool, but it lets us find the selected audio file that we've chosen on the project page in the pool. This command is actually found under the audio menu. It's actually grayed out right now because we're in the pool, but if we were on the project page, you'd see it there. This file can now be minimized because we're only using a small section from it. The rest of the audio file, the start and the end, is going to be erased permanently now. Choose Minimize File. A dialog like this will come up. Minimizing files will clear the entire edit history. Do you want to go on? This means that the undo history will be erased. Cubase has unlimited undos. All your undos under the edit menu history won't be there anymore. If you are sure you want to do this, press Minimize. This is one of those features that you usually use when the project is finished and you are just minimizing files to save disk space. It's not something you'll do all the time. Once you use this command, you should save your project as the file size for the audio file has now changed, and the Cubase project file needs to be saved to remember this change. New version creates an imaginary copy of the audio file. The first one and the second file are referencing to the same audio file on the hard drive. This doesn't actually make a new copy of the file on the hard drive for you, just a new edit version for you to use. You can insert files from the pool to the project page by just dragging and dropping them, or you can use this command, insert into project. @cursor inserts the file wherever you place the cursor, and @origin, well, this is a little trickier to explain, but it's the original start time where a clip was recorded in the project. This is known as the origin time. So we could use this if you recorded a file in Cubase and then accidentally erased it. You might be worried because you might not be sure where the audio file began. Take, for example, this file here. The origin time says it's bar 5 and a little bit. Let's use the insert into project, @origin. This now has inserted the audio file into its original position, or the origin. It always gets inserted on the track that you've selected, so make sure you select the track first and then use this command. Select in project we've already looked at, and Search Media opens up a search window just like the one that we saw right here with this button. The other three options are for processing files in the pool. This information is covered in level 3 of this video series. Workspaces are virtual desktops memorizing size, position, and the content of windows. You can save, manage, and recall entire window sets for fast desktop switching. Workspaces in Cubase replace layouts found in earlier versions of Cubase. Workspaces are found under the window menu. The current workspace ID can be seen here. The 1 means that workspace ID number 1 is activated. The period after it means that it is locked. You can switch between workspaces by selecting each one here. Notice the key commands: Alt plus Pad 1, Alt and Pad 2, Alt and Pad 3. I'm going to switch really quickly by using key commands. Let's go to our third workspace and unlock it. Notice that the period disappears. If the workspace is not locked, you can change the way it looks. Then when you switch between workspaces and come back to the one you've changed, its changes stay intact. Let's readjust the window and lock it again. This prevents a workspace from accidentally being changed. To create a new workspace, choose New Workspace. Choose a name for your new workspace and press OK. Change the way you want your workspace to look. Add a mixer, throw in the editor. Since we like it this way, let's lock it. You can organize your workspaces. Choose Organize here. On the left-hand side, you can see the workspaces that are in your current project. You can lock them, unlock them, and rename them here. If you use IDs, you can assign a number to each workspace. Then when you assign a key command to the workspace, a number ID can be used instead of whatever one is first or second. This makes sense because workspaces can be deleted, added, and stored as presets both for the project and globally. Having this much control can get a little confusing, and that's why we have IDs, to lock a workspace into a key command without Cubase getting confused. You can delete workspaces so they won't show up, but before you do this, you can store presets, allowing you to call these back when you need them. You can also store presets globally so that all your projects have access to your special workspaces. The auto-instantiate presets means that whenever you make a new project, the global workspaces presets are automatically converted to project workspaces so that you can use them right away. Older Cubase projects containing window layouts will be converted to workspaces automatically to ensure seamless transition from layouts to the new ones. The project page is your main work area. You'll be spending the most time here, so get to know it. First of all, we can resize this page. There are 3 buttons at the top of the page that turn windows on and off. Make sure you can see view switches, as explained in the video customizing Cubase. The first button shows or hides the inspector window. The next button shows or hides the event info line. The event info line gives you information on the selected event on the project page. You can see the name, the start, the end, the length, offset, and depending on what you have selected, you'll see more options here. The next button shows or hides the overview. This shows you everything in the project. You can move back and forth between events by click dragging on the lower half of this window. You can adjust the zoom in and out by also adjusting the lower part of the window on each side. If you move your mouse to the upper part of the window, you can redraw your viewing selection and make a new one. Let's do this to this section and adjust it if necessary. The other 2 buttons allow you to open the pool and open the mixer, which are both discussed later. You can zoom in or out vertically and horizontally by using these sliders or plus and minus buttons here. If you want to zoom to your locators, you can select it by pressing this button. Or zoom full to see the entire project. You can make your own zoom presets by selecting Add and Organize. By pressing this button here, you can zoom the track heights to suit your taste. You can also turn snapping on for the track heights so that things look a little neater. You can move this slider here so that the audio file appears larger in scale, making precise editing easier. This doesn't adjust any volume, it just makes it look bigger. At the bottom of the track, you can see what your project attributes are set at. Right now we are set up for recording at 44.1, 16-bit. We have 109 hours and 9 minutes of recording time, and our pan law is set to -3 dB. You can change these options by selecting Project Setup from the Project menu. If you're not sure what all these features are for, you can click the Help button. Everything is well explained here. Let's close this window by clicking OK. Let's look at these two buttons here. The one with the colors is for showing track colors. With this button on, you can click in the extra column that pops up and choose a color for the track. The cool thing about these colors is that these ones show up in the mixer, and you can use them to color group certain tracks together. The other button is the Divide Track List. You can divide the project page into two parts and toggle tracks to the top pane and vice versa. Right-click on the track you want to move and choose Toggle Track List. Basically, this allows you to scroll the bottom track list while the top one stays stationary. A great use for this is to have a video or market track above as a reference track and all your audio tracks below. The ruler area can be switched by right-clicking on it. It shows bars and beats, seconds, timecode, samples, or a user frame rate. There is also time linear and bars and beats linear. If you have tempo changes in the tempo track, then time linear will show you the distance between the bar lines as being variable depending on the tempo. If you have bars and beats linear, then the distance between the bar lines will be equal. Time linear is good for people working with classical or jazz scores using retardandos and accelerandos. If you're doing rock or electronic music, you probably want to keep it on bars and beats linear. The play order track allows you to use a pattern structure in your projects, meaning you can arrange and remix changing the play order with patterns or blocks of data. Let's use this project because it already contains a full song and we can pick different sections that we want to play with. When you add a play order track, you can define areas of your project with the Draw tool. I'm going to draw a section right here. Another section over here. And one more section over here. The first one's not in the right spot, so let's just edit it. There we go, that should be it. Something I want to show you is that when you create or edit a play order part, it actually shows you the length of each part. See that? It says length 6 bars, 5 bars, 4 bars. Basically, I want each of mine to be 4 bars in length. I already have a marker track at the top here that just tells me where different parts of the song are. Let's rename each of the play order parts. For this one, I'm going to use the marker name. Let's just call it Soft Guitars. Next, it says Heavy with Drums. I'll just call it Heavy. Then the last one says Heavy Sweep. I'll just call it Sweep. I'm going to rearrange my screen a bit here just to open this up a little bit. There we go. We just want to see those 3 buttons there. I'm going to move this over a bit and maybe even zoom in just a little. There we go. That looks a little nicer to look at. These parts can then be arranged to play in a particular order. This can be done in the inspector. Let's move this bottom part up here. and we can actually see the 3 parts that we've created. Drag and drop the parts from the bottom into the list above. We'll do soft guitars once, then I'll do heavy. I'll do heavy twice. See the number 2 appear right here? And then I'll grab sweep, but this time I'm just going to double click on it. And it's popped up above here. So we have soft guitars playing once, heavy playing twice, and then the sweep section playing once. Now you'll be able to play your song according to this list. Activate play order and begin playback. The play order button is right here. Now just press play on the transport bar. I'll let it play through so you can hear what it sounds like. Notice how the cursor jumps from each play order part, and when finished, repeats back to the beginning. Let's view the play order controls at the top of the screen here. If you need to play from a specific part in the list, you can click on the triangle and press play, or use these arrow buttons to guide you around. You can open the play order editor by clicking on E here and create as many play order lists as you like. Add more with this button. Let's make a new arrangement. You may have to open this window up just a bit so you can see everything here. And we'll open it up on this side too. Let's listen to the new play order I've just created. Now let's switch back to the other one and hear how that one sounds. You can rename your current play order by pressing here. You can add a new one here. You can duplicate a play order. And then you can remove a play order. You know about most of these features right here, but these other 2 windows will tell you the duration of each section and the total song time for the current play order. Once you're done making the perfect arrangement, you can turn your play order list into a complete song, based on the list of patterns that you've made. This is called flattening the play order. Click this button here to flatten your play order list. It took our 3 sections, erased everything else, and put them all together. If you had repeats, it actually just put them one right after the other. Let's listen to the entire song now. Now that's a powerful and cool feature. Let's take a deeper look into recording audio. We've just recorded some audio on inputs 1 and 2 in stereo. See how the audio file was named? My track was called Audio 01. I actually should have changed that to drums. And then look, the actual part name got called Audio 01. Now there's a little underscore here and a number. As you record more and more and more, this N number increases. Let's do that right now. I'm going to manually punch in and out. Let's stop, take off the monitor, and take off Record Enable. Let's zoom in a bit and see how Cubase has named our audio files. See that? Audio 01 has remained the same, but underscore 03, 04, 05, 06. You may not like this name. Having audio 01 underscore 05 is not the best name, so we need to change this for better description. Let's change the first one. Make sure the info line is showing and look to the far left. Don't forget to select the audio event or nothing will show up in the info bar. You are able to change the name of your audio file directly on the hard disk in this spot. Be careful when naming files and don't forget to save the project right away. This is to make sure that the Cubase project saves and knows about the audio file name change you've just put in. Now this is a better name. Let's use the eraser and erase the other stuff. If you cut the audio file in half, you'll see that the description for both cuts are the same. Let's change the description for both of these events in the description field in the info line. You can see that there's a description for the audio event and the name of the audio file. Once again, a description for this event and the name for the audio file of where the event came from. You should now have a better idea of how Cubase names and manages its recorded audio files. File management is 90% of the battle when recording in audio programs. When I cut the audio file in half, the audio file on the hard drive was unaffected. Cubase just read the audio file from the hard drive and then stopped reading it. And then continues reading in the middle of the audio file and then stops again. So don't worry about cutting, copying, and erasing like crazy on the project page. There are different ways to monitor the incoming signal in Cubase. Go to the File menu and choose Preferences. Click on VST and select the pop-up menu under Audio Monitoring. We recorded our audio in manual monitoring mode. This means we get to choose when we hear the incoming signal at any time, either while playing or recording or when it stopped. If you choose while record enabled, if you press the record button on the transport bar, the monitor button will come on for the track that has the record enable button on. While record running means if it's actually recording. And finally, tape machine style, well, this is a very popular one. This emulates standard tape machines, input monitoring in stop mode and during recording, but not during playback. This is perfect for a vocalist recording overdubs. There are two ways to punch in and punch out in Cubase. One of them is the manual way, and the other is the automatic way. When you're recording an audio track, you can use the record button to automatically punch in and out of record. This is a great way to punch in and out. You can also do this automatically by setting punch in and out points. You set these using the left and right locators. Let's say we want to punch in at bar 3 and out at bar 5. Set the left locator to bar 3 and the right locator to bar 5. I did this using Control for the left locator and Alt for the right locator. Activate the punch in button and the punch out button. Record enable the track, rewind to the beginning, and press the play button. You can see that Cubase plays, and then when it reaches bar 3, it begins recording, and then stops recording at bar 5. Now watch the punch-in button when I stop Cubase. It actually turns off. Generally you want this to turn off, because when you go back to listen to it, you don't want it recording again. Go to the Preferences, and under the Transport submenu, you'll find Deactivate Punch-In on Stop. You can turn this off if you wish, but it makes sense to keep it on. The punch in and out can be individually turned on or off. For example, you could have Cubase punch in automatically, but then you could punch out manually by not turning on punch out. Now we're going to create a new map. Let's press New Map at the bottom here. You might have a kit on your keyboard that starts at C3. Scroll to that and start naming your kit. Kick. I won't use the black notes. Snare. I'll skip this black note too. I'm going to skip E, F, and usually I have some hi-hat sounds on F sharp 3, G sharp 3, and A sharp 3. You can actually move the notes around, but I wouldn't recommend this. It starts getting too confusing. The quantize is for when you're drawing notes in the editor. This is the resolution they will be placed in. Remember, if you want them all to change, click, hold down Control, and select it. I'm going to put mine to 16th notes. Click, hold down Control, and select it by clicking again. The M is the mute column, so you can mute your sounds. When you're done, you can move the column around so that the mute appears first or second place. The in note and out note should not change, but you could do cool things with this. Imagine this, you could play C3 on your keyboard, but actually, it will play D3. You can then arrange this by having a note go out to a different MIDI channel and then to an entirely different output. Think about the massive drum kits you could make from different keyboards on different MIDI channels. It's endless. It can start off being a bit confusing, but once you make the ultimate drum maps, you'll have all your sounds from all your instruments at your disposal. Drum maps are saved with the project, So if you want to share drum maps between projects or other friends, you should save your drum map on the hard drive and then load it up in another project. Now that we're in the score editor, we can see that our piano and flute don't look anything like what we expected. This isn't a problem, we just need to fix it. Once we know what to do, it'll look great. Let's first concentrate on what octave these instruments are in. The flute is about 2 octaves too low, and the piano, well, we could bump it up an octave. They sound good, but we don't want to transpose them. We want to visually transpose them. Yes, this means it will sound the same, but look better. Nice, huh? Double-click just before the flute staff. I'm going to move my staff settings window over so that I can see the flute part. Type in 24 in the display transpose window and press apply. This means it's going to display the flute 24 semitones higher than what it really is, making it look a lot nicer. Now the flute still doesn't look right. I played very simple notes here. The quickest I played was 8th notes, and so these two should be set to 8th notes. I didn't have anything special when I played, like triplets, so let's turn auto quantize to off. Hit the apply button. There, now that looks better. Now let's fix up the piano. There's no need to close this window, simply click on the piano staff, and the staff settings window changes tracks for you. Let's display quantize it up an octave. Let's hit the apply button. And the piano was quite basic, just like the flute part was. So I'm going to do the same things here that I did to the flute. There are some other options we can play with here. No overlap. In the piano, we see a note overlapping. Let's click on piano, press no overlap, and apply it. That certainly cleans it up for us. Well, our score certainly looks better. Now let's play it back to see our result. Obviously, we can do a lot more to this to make it look better, but that's it for the basics of the score editor. You can have a video file play in Cubase. The different types of video can be found in the device setup under the Devices menu. Click on Video Player on the left-hand side. You can pick what type of video you're going to use, whether it be DirectX Video or QuickTime Video. You may have different options under Mac OS X. And on that note, on OS X, you can play back the video file on external equipment through the FireWire port. Very, very cool. I'm going to use DirectX Video, so I'll change it to DirectX here. Hit OK, and then add a video track. I've already imported a video file into my pool. I'm going to go to my pool, grab the file, and drop it on the project page. If you go to the Preferences under the File menu, and then to Video under the Event Display submenu, you'll see that you can turn on or off video thumbnails and change the video cache size. The video cache is for how much memory you are allowing Cubase to give to the thumbnails. If you have long clips and the zoom factor is showing lots of thumbnails, you may want to raise this value. Let's go back to the project page. There are 3 buttons on the video track. The first is for locking the track. You may want to do this so that the video does not accidentally move out of position. The next button shows the frame numbers of each frame that the thumbnail displays. The last button, Snap Thumbnails, when activated, shows the individual thumbnail images positioned exactly at their respective start time position. Also, no more than 1 thumbnail per frame will be shown. This can easily be seen when I zoom in. And let's zoom back out to what I had it to before. You can have a video window play by selecting Video from the Devices menu. You can resize this window to change the size of the video. I love this next feature. You can right-click on the video window and select Full Screen Mode, expanding the video to full screen. Press Escape to go back to normal. Something to note about editing, when you're moving the cursor, the video will follow along. This makes editing so easy. You can get right in on those very precise edits. Folder tracks can do a lot of things. I was amazed when I saw how much they could do. Right-click and add a folder track. Now start putting some tracks in it. You can do this one at a time, or shift-select some tracks and drag them in. And you can arrange them in the folder as you just saw me do it there. You can also have different types of tracks in a folder. Right now we have audio. Let's add a MIDI track. If you want to remove a track from the folder, just pull it out. The indent tells you these tracks are in the folder above. Now fold up the track. Let's make the folder bigger. Now we are able to see our audio files inside the folder. If we cut, move, and erase within the folder track, all of its contents change with it. When you look at the inspector, you can see all the tracks that are in that folder. If you select one of them, their inspector information will show up below. A really cool thing to use folder tracks for is when you are recording multiple tracks. Let's say we are about to record drums. When you record, enable, or monitor a folder track, all the audio tracks within that folder become record enabled. This saves you a lot of time. We've just gone over insert display modes. There are also send display modes. There are normal and routing. You can add a send, turn it on, and turn it up. You can even make it pre-fader to create neat sounds. Well, the routing window gives you a bit more options. The main things are still here: the pre and post fader, the power button, the sense fader, and the output selection. There are two new things here: this button and the pan window. This allows you to send to the effect channel the panning that you want. If you have this button on, it will link the panner of your track with the panning of the send. If you want to break this, you can turn off this button and then send the pan the way you want, while your track pan could be something else. This is great, for example, if you have a guitar pan to the left or the right, but the send is going to both the left and right inputs of the effects channel. You can have your reverb in stereo with the channel panned to the left or right. This really helps with delay effects too. You might not have known this, but you can have multiple channel setting windows up. Click the E button for one of the channels. It's a good idea to right-click and choose Always on Top. This will prevent other windows from going on top of this window. Hold down the Alt key and press another E button. Now we have two windows open. While audio is playing, you can change the view of the meters. Right-click on the mixer and choose Global Meter Settings. You can hold the peaks of the meter. This is good for seeing how loud the audio tracks were in the last couple of seconds. And hold Forever. This is good for seeing how loud the audio tracks were at their loudest point. I like to choose Fast Release so that the meters drop very quickly. It looks a little slicker. The last three are for viewing the meter at different stages of the signal path. The most useful editor is the key editor. When you need to edit a MIDI part, the first thing you usually do is double-click on the part to enter the key editor. You can actually change this behavior in the Preferences under the File menu. Go to MIDI under Event Display. The default edit action is the editor that will open when you double-click on it. You can change this to one of the other four editors. The key editor has four main sections. The top button section, where you can right-click and decide what options you can view. The next section is the info line. You can turn this on or off with the Show Info button. Next is the area in which you edit and view your MIDI data. And the last section is the controller lane area, where you can draw in MIDI controller information. Since this is well beyond the Key Editor 101 video, I'm going to jump into more fancy features. Press the Show Part Borders button. You can now see where the boundaries of the part are. Watch above to see the MIDI part change in the project page. You can actually move the part end before the end of the MIDI notes, and they will become unplayable notes outside of the part. This is a good way to hide notes without deleting them. You could also use the mute tool for this, but sometimes this is easier and quicker. When you move notes around, and you go past the boundaries, Cubase will ask you if you want to enlarge the part. You can pick enlarge or no. Knowing about the show part borders is good, because if this was off and you move the MIDI notes, you might wonder why this dialog box was popping up. When editing the MIDI notes, you might want to turn on the solo editor button so that you can hear just what is playing in this editor. When you exit this editor, all the music will play together again. This saves you the trouble of soloing and unsoloing in the mixer window. The acoustic feedback button allows you to hear the notes when you are moving or editing them. Listening to the hi-hat gets to be a little too much. Let's change the velocity of its notes. The nice thing about this editor is that the controller window only shows the velocity of the note you've selected. Change every other note so that the velocity is cut in half. For every third one, I'm going to drop it about 75%. Let's do something special at the end here. Now, the hats sound nice. The tempo seems a little fast. I'm going to bring it down to about 110. I think that has a little more groove to it. The kick drum needs some velocity shaping. For these notes, let's make it very light. The other ones we can play with to make them sound natural. The snare is the real test though. Let's add a few here and there and drop their velocity levels super low. Sounds like we have a nice loose snare sound now. And that's how we can effectively use the drum editor. The drum editor has all the same basic functionality as the other editors, with one big difference. It can handle drum maps. Drum maps can be very simple, like in this case. We didn't even have to use it. It was automatic with the LM7 drum machine. Now let's go back to the project page and talk about drum maps. Go to the inspector and choose Drum Map Setup from this pull-down window. The reason this window exists is that not all manufacturers use the same note position and mapping. Or you might be using a sampler in which you've done your own key mapping. This is the spot where you can create your own map and name the notes to your liking. This window contains the same information that you'll find in the drum editor, so let's go back in there. At the bottom, choose Drum Map Setup. See, it looks like the same window. Plugins can also be automated. Let's add an insert plugin to this drum track. We'll add reverb and then make it always on top. Make sure automation mode is in view and choose Touch Fader. This means that automation gets written as soon as you touch the fader and then stops when you let go. Turn on the read and write automation buttons and then play with the mix of the reverb. Let's stop this and take off the write button. Now press the plus sign to see the automation we've just written. Choose Reverb A Mix from the list of automation parameters. Play Cubase and listen. The auto-latch mode works where the automation will continue writing unless you press the write button off or stop Cubase. Crossover is cool. It's like auto-latch, but as soon as you cross an existing or previous automation, it stops recording. Overwrite is more destructive. As soon as you begin playback in Cubase, the automation gets recorded, and then it doesn't stop until you stop Cubase. The trim mode is used for volume automation only. When you're writing in trim mode, it offsets the automation that is already there. You don't even need to be playing back to trim the automation. If Cubase is playing and trim mode is on, it will affect the automation after, just at, and beyond the playback head. Almost all other tracks can record automation in the same way we've just learned here. The drum editor is great for editing drums, as the name implies. I'll give you a quick rundown and then we'll get into the details. We have a MIDI part here spanning one bar. The output of the track is going to the virtual instrument LM7. Click on the part and choose Open Drum Editor from the MIDI menu. Since the LM4 has its drum sounds laid out in the general MIDI fashion, we won't have any problem with the sounds matching up. I'll talk about drum maps later. Zoom in so we can just see bar 1 clearly. Press play in Cubase and make sure the cycle is turned on. Let's slow the tempo down to about 120. Open the window up a bit more and make sure you can see the quantize column. This means that we can have 16th note divisions while we are placing in and editing notes. In order to change everything to 16th notes, you need to click on it, open the window, select what you want, press Ctrl, and then click. All of them now should say 16th notes. Grab the drumstick tool and drop in some notes. Click on the same spots to delete them. Now find the closed hi-hat. Click in the open box to the left of it. Make sure it's the right sound. We're going to draw in 16th note hi-hats across the screen. Click at the beginning and then drag. We don't need to do the last one since this is the downbeat of the next bar. Now let's drop in the kick on every quarter note. And then a snare on every second beat. Let's play with this. Let's change up the kick drum by adding a few notes. There, now that's a nice kick pattern. Group channels allow you to group tracks so that you can control one fader on a track instead of controlling 3, 4, or 5 faders. I'm going to group these 3 guitar tracks here. Right-click on the track column and select Add Group Channel Track. You can make this track mono, stereo, or surround. Choose stereo and hit OK. It's a good idea to name your track, so let's call this Guitar G for Guitars Group. Now open your mixer, which is found under the Devices menu, and you'll see a group channel at the end. Make sure the top portion of the mixer is turned on at the bottom far left. Now take your chorus guitars and send their outputs to the group channel you've created. Now we have a volume fader for just our chorus guitars. A group channel has all the same functionality as a regular channel in that you can press the E button, add inserts, adjust EQ, and send to effects channels. You can also add group channels in the VST Connections window found under the Devices menu. Add a group channel here, and the same dialog box pops up, making a group channel for you. There's literally no difference where you make the channel. They are both the same thing. You need to understand the differences between events and parts. Think of audio events as raw audio on the project page. A dead giveaway that this is an event is that it has triangle fade handles on each side of the event, and you can see a volume control handle in the middle. You can tell this is a part because it doesn't have the volume or fade handles. Plus the name part looks a bit different. When you record audio in Cubase, it shows up first as an event. You will see a part appear if you are importing older VST songs and if you make them yourself. Let's erase this part and show you how to handle parts and events. Generally, you don't need to make parts because you can do just about 99% of your editing right here on the project page. You can chop things in half, move them around, adjust their sizes, etc. When you double-click on an event, it takes you into the sample editor. This is as far as you can go. There is nothing beyond this window. Here you can make regions, use the audio warp tool, draw your own samples, use hit points, etc. Think of the sample editor as the name implies. You can really edit your samples here. Now close the sample editor. What if you have a whole bunch of small audio events? At some point, you may need to move these around or make some other edits. It would be a shame if one or two of these events got out of time. Or if I was moving them, I forgot one of the events. This is where parts come in handy. Think of a part as a container, so we can throw all of these events into a part. Let's do this by selecting all the events and then choose Events to Part from the audio menu. Now we can move all these audio events around in one part. It's so convenient. If you need to make some changes to these events inside this part, you can double-click on the part. This opens the audio part editor. Go ahead and make your changes as usual. You can think of this as an extension of the project page. Almost all of the same tools are here. It's just contained within a part. If you click on the Show Part Borders button, you can change the left and right part borders and have these changes reflect on the project page. Watch this. Everything you do is instantly reflected in the project page. That should give you a better understanding of the sample editor versus the part editor and the differences between events and parts.